Rebel Ridge is a 2024 action film directed by Jeremy Saulnier. He is the director, most notably, of Blue Ruin and Green Room, and this is his fourth feature film. Hold the Dark, we don't really talk about. But this is a return to form after his first two successes and a little bit of a dip. A former Marine confronts corruption in a small town when local law enforcement unjustly seizes the bag of cash he needs to post his cousin's bail. I don't really feel like I'm very good at giving non-spoiler overviews, so I'll just touch on a few things real quick before I dive into spoilers. This is a film that touches mostly on institutions, the way that they are more or less invulnerable to one singular person, even if they try to do things the right way. Even if they try to do things the wrong way, really. It takes multiple people, potentially a lot of people in some cases, to band together, to have the courage to stand up, to make changes. And ultimately, this is what the film is concerned with. It's concerned with motivations people have for the beliefs they hold, the way they justify themselves and their actions, both to themselves and others. It's a movie that, as presented, reflects the protagonist quite well, I think. The protagonist, Terry, in the film is very stoic. He does a great job, like I said earlier, doing things the right way. And, whether that be using the legal means available to him or interacting with police officers, you can always see that he is trying to do things correctly, whether it's, when he gets pulled over, like putting his hands in the right place and asking if his hands are in the right place, or saying yes sir, no sir to authority figures, or using the bail system and trying to give his cousin like a stable job, all these things. Like, he is trying to hold it together. He is trying to do the right thing. And as the film is presented, it's very even. It's not very flashy. And I think that's just like our main character. It fits nicely. Not being flashy is not a problem because it's still very polished and it moves well. It's also focused pretty heavily on Terry's face. You can see like little facial tics when he's under duress and stressed out and clearly has the deck stacked against him. The camera has a heavy focus on his eyes and his face and his emotions, but they're subtle for the most part. And the film and him both are relatively restrained in various ways that I think tie up pretty nicely. So that's it for the preview. I just want to jump into a couple of things specifically I enjoyed about it. I guess I mostly talked about Terry doing things the right way already, so we'll just skip that one. But another one is the way it paints character motivations. I've always kind of been interested in why people believe things, especially if they seem very off the wall to me. Like people who believe the most insane things, I assume, have, their internal justifications that they have. Presumably they think that, if someone came up to them and be like, why do you think this? They would think those justifications would hold up under scrutiny. Because, of course, we all believe the things we believe. I think there's a great scene related to this with the police chief. There are really a couple of scenes that are tied together. When he's in the car, driving Terry over to the hospital to give him the deal, he is talking about why, essentially, they have the cash and the arms. Talking about how they are short on funding, the government keeps cutting their funding, they need to operate for the good of the community. They loan out the other guns to other police officers, other stations, or whatever. So he's giving us this justification that he holds to. The reason that it is justified to, do this legal thing, this seizure of assets that they would love to get away with, that they have gotten away with. He justifies it as being good. And, that of course all could be lip service for Terry as well. There's no reason to believe he's being entirely truthful at mostly any point. But regardless, that is an explanation. It is a justification that someone can provide to do something morally questionable to reprehensible, whatever it may be. And then, of course, we discover later through the investigation and through, I think the judge who may have delivered this information, it doesn't matter, that the civil suit, more or less almost bankrupted the town. And so, of course, now you get the hidden missing piece of information with why the police officers' funding gets cut and why they're in dire straits to begin with and why they have to, self-fund through seizure of assets. So it's just interesting to me to see like this justification and a thin justification and the way that just falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. But it's an insight, I think, and a pretty good one, a pretty good example of the way people have their justifications for things they believe that probably sound good in their head, but if you see a challenge to it, it doesn't hold up much water. There's another aspect of motivations in the sort of bystanders that are depicted in the movie. People like the clerk and the judge who understand what they're getting into. But, there are multiple people in the movie who I think literally use the phrase, like, I just don't want to know. It brings up an interesting question of value, more or less, because people are trying to do these things. Even Summer, who does end up helping Terry. Even she has her hesitation at first. She doesn't want to help because she wants to keep the job. She wants to provide for her daughter. The clerk doesn't want to get involved. He's got a kid, but he's also got people to provide for, and he deems that to be more important than making a good moral choice. The judge knows it's wrong. He wanted a cut of the money. He also had a wife to support. Oh, and then there's also the one cop that Terry blindsides with the car, who says like, not quite like them. I have a wife and kid too. So there's a lot of people who have made decisions, who have decided to be okay with things. Even Serpico, Scorpio, whatever they decide to call her, even she is making sacrifices, moral sacrifices, more or less. In the beginning, we can kind of see some of her indecision. We see that she is loyal to the police officers for a while in the final conflict. And she's okay with that because, we don't get anything explicit for her. But the general theme is people are fine with making moral sacrifices if they decide that it's going to be worth it for something they care about. In this case, people they care about, which makes for a compelling dynamic, I think, because of course you want to provide for people you care about. It's self-explanatory. You want them to be safe. If you care about them, you want good things for them. And they also have the benefit of kind of seeing behind the scenes at some of the power, some of the things that these, institutions may have already done. And perhaps they have reason to be fearful. Certainly they have reason to be fearful given what they did to Summer, given what they did to Terry as well, given what they did to Michael, the number of other people who got detained for 90 days. And these people, it just gives them a little bit of understandability. You get that you want to keep your people safe. It's because we see what happened to the other people as a result of their complicity. It's at least led to 2 accidental deaths so far, plus a bunch of people imprisoned, having their money taken. It's just an interesting question of is it even worth it? Even if you were okay with it morally, is it worth the sacrifice of other people's lives and resources? Obviously, people we care about are disproportionately more important to us than other random people we don't know are. Where's the line? If we could guarantee that only a couple of people were harmed by a moral indiscretion, would that make it okay to sacrifice their well-being for someone we love? Just viewing it, dispassionately from a distance, it'd be easy to say, no, of course, everyone's life matters equally, but how often do we actually treat people like that? I just think that's an interesting dynamic to put across. I just love that whole dynamic with the motivations of the villains and as well as side characters who are innocents, but also not innocents. I am a little bit iffy on whether the cop at the end who becomes a good cop when he gets shot. I'm unsure whether I'm cool with that happening so fast. He's set up a little bit at the beginning to be a bit of a rule guy, to be not as much of a dick as that other, bearded police officer guy. So I think there's a little bit of room to maneuver with him. If a police officer was going to switch and be the good guy, I suppose it makes sense it could be him. It could also be the guy that Terry handcuffed. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I think there was a little bit of room there, so I don't mind it that much. It just seemed fast. And granted, there was a good instigating effort, with seemingly the police officers being okay with him dying as long as it led to them being safe and the money being safe. So I could see that might have shattered his illusions, of what police officers were and what everything meant to him. I guess it still seems to me like it was probably a little bit fast. And I wish that, I don't know, maybe he just needed to come across a little bit friendlier, a little bit more amenable in the opening scene. But yeah, that rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And then of course, as much as I was talking about themes and characters and stuff like that, there is a good amount of action. I do really like the style of hand-to-hand combat that the film uses. The fact that he's trying to do everything non-lethally is a great touch, a little bit of a mix-up compared to almost every other action movie out there. And it's almost like a gentle style of fighting in a weird way. For the most part, except for that one time he stomps on the guy's arm to snap it in half, it almost feels like he's trying to do the least amount possible. When he's subduing people, it's usually kind of gentle movements and pulling the gun away from them slowly. He, of course, does some throws here and there, but it's nothing so over the top as, you might see in a mainline action movie, which I think makes sense given that, his background is that he's actually trained to do this stuff. Like I said, the presentation is plain. He's pretty even. It would be weird if the fighting was suddenly way over the top. So this style of fighting, I think, also matches with the tone and style of the movie. And it's got a little bit of uniqueness. I don't think I've ever seen fight sequences or fighting with quite this kind of style. So I appreciate that. And the fact that it's non-lethal doesn't make it less interesting. The fact that he, like I said, I called it like slightly more gentle looking. That doesn't make it less interesting either. So yeah, I mean, all said, I liked it a lot. I think it's one of my favorites of 2024 so far. I would certainly recommend it. It's on Netflix right now, so would absolutely recommend checking it out. And, let me know what you think of it. And I'll see you in the next video.